Back here with Matt Norlander. Will the whispers get big enough for that to be a storyline? Does Baylor knock Kansas off the one line, or perhaps another team that lost a one seed like Auburn and Arizona?
I don't think so right now, because you had Kentucky in contention for that, lose on the road against a tournament team, just like Kansas lost on the road against a tournament team, just like Purdue lost on the road against a tournament team on Saturday. We have had a lot of noise, but if you're wondering if what all of these, highly ranked teams losing means, teams 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the AP Top 25 poll all lost on Saturday, many of them in road spots there. Does it mean we're going to have changes in the bracket, 1 seed, 2 seeds? To be honest, maybe some minimal ones overall, like Duke was able to win on the road against a bad Syracuse team. Okay, maybe that gets them up a little bit, but no, I still think Kansas, by a narrow margin, probably still deserves to be the on that top one line right there with Auburn. You can kind of split hairs, but I want to talk about Baylor, because what the Bears did here, they don't have LJ Cryer, their leading scorer, yet again. They're down early, and they rally in the most impressive of ways. I mean, Scott Drew's team turned Kansas's water off for any player not named Ochai Agbaji. Agbaji still got his, and it's kind of like I just mentioned Auburn. Like, Jabari Smith was terrific for the Tigers earlier in the day. It didn't matter. Auburn still got knocked off on the road. Here, Agbaji got largely what he needed to, but it wasn't nearly enough from everyone else. And this is where I have sometimes concerns with Kansas and its point guard situation. David McCormick's a little inconsistent. But this is, I wrote it on CBSSports.com. I've mentioned it on multiple editions of the Eye on College Basketball podcast. I have been imploring people to not sell their Baylor stock. This team is good enough to win the national championship. It did what it did on Saturday, albeit at home, without its leading scorer. Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, of course, is out for the season, and that certainly lowers Baylor's ceiling overall. But it is among those 10 to 12 teams that have enough to cut down the nets this season. This was that kind of win that reaffirms that. It sends another notice to the rest of the Big 12 and really to the sport nationally that, yes, the reigning national champions, did we forget? Baylor won the title last year. It's got it again. Scott Drew has done an amazing job. He has built an incredible culture there. And culture is a word that gets overused in college sports. There's no doubt about it. But when I talk to coaches, ADs, people in the sport, they continue to go back to a couple of coaches in particular. Jay Wright at Villanova, Scott Drew at Baylor. There are certain elements to those coaches' personalities that they have spent years, more than a decade, cultivating. And that's why, like a lot of other teams that would have been in the spot Baylor was earlier in the year, top 5, good record, but continually having injury issues, it would be entirely reasonable if those teams just slipped a bit more. They're sitting at 18 in the rankings instead of 5 or 10. They're sitting at 24. Maybe they fall out. Baylor, it's just not happening there. They're going to be a factor when it comes to March. I could not be more impressed. It sounds crazy to say. Scott Drew did an amazing job last season. His coaching job at this point is getting close to how good he was a year ago.
Well, we know he resuscitated that program and then won the national championship and had such a talented roster last season, much of that roster returning. Some guys obviously not returning, some guys going to the NBA, the G League. But look at he didn't have a deep bench today. He had 2 players come off the bench. And Jeremy Sohan goes for 17 points. They're able to bring a guy in, give a guy some rest, but they still get productive minutes. That sort of speaks to your point of the coaching that Scott Drew does.
Without a doubt. You had Sohan 17, Flo Thamba, he comes out, 18 for Flo Thamba. You're not getting 18 from Thamba on a nightly basis. You're just not. You got Adam Flagler with 13, and then James Akinjo, who had a couple of nice plays. He had 12. So, yes, Baylor is thinner. But weirdly enough, Scott Drew is actually a little bit used to this, because even a few years back when Baylor was a good, high-quality, top 15-level team, Tristan Clark at that point was its best player back then, and they lost him, and they were still able to kind of keep up. Scott Drew has had experience here in losing important players and still keeping Baylor competitive in the Big 12, let alone top 10 level like the Bears are right now. So, yes, important win. Kansas is still probably going to win and finish atop the ledger in the Big 12 overall, but this at least delays that a little bit longer, and it helps Baylor's case down the road to maybe getting that 2 seed. I mean, when you look at quad 1, quad 2, both games combined, played, and wins, Baylor is near the top of that list in the entire sport. So the Bears, they are setting themselves up well, as there are fewer and fewer games remaining in the regular season and in the Big 12 tournament. A large portion of the resume has been built, and I think that's important to remind viewers, college basketball fans. Yes, the results still coming over the next week and a half, 2 weeks before we get to Selection Sunday. They still matter, but we've reached a point, Hakeem, where 85 to 87, 88% of a team's dossier, their tournament dossier, if you will, it's been completed. So, yeah, there's still room to move, but Baylor set itself up really well so far.
Baylor just now a half game behind Kansas in the Big 12. So your Bills self, you go on the road, you lose to Baylor. Of course, earlier in the season, you beat Baylor at home. What's the lesson? What's the takeaway for the Jayhawks?
Well, you certainly got to know. They already know they can't solely rely on Ochai Agbaji, and they won't. Like Christian Brown's had some really nice performances. He's there. DeJuan Harris, he is a improving point guard, but you've got to have better defensive consistency from start to finish. Now, this was a tough game on the road. Let's acknowledge that. A big build-up. This was the highly ranked matchup on a loaded Saturday. This was the number 1 matchup of the day overall, but Kansas, I still think it's going to be fine. I mean, I don't have any overly large concerns about the future of KU and its prospects of making a run to New Orleans and making the Final Four. I do want to see more out of Dave McCormick. He's been a bit up and down, a bit inconsistent. It's just the nature of it. They do need him to be better. If you want me to point to what I think is the biggest individual thing that's going to determine whether or not Kansas can make a run, win 4 games, and go to the national semifinals, I actually think it's the play of Harris, its point guard. But the 1B to that 1A is McCormick and his reliability as a big there. I'm not breaking news to Kansas fans. They've been living with this all this season. And a season ago, he has some really nice moments where he steps up and shines, but there are other moments here where he doesn't. And Baylor, with its athleticism, and, Jeremy Sohan, Kendall Brown, they were able to step up big. Flo Thamba, the big there, all playing a part in that. And it was an authoritative, come from behind kind of win. Like Baylor just took the game, and they would not let Kansas have it. So that was mighty impressive by the Bears as they set up for the home stretch here in the regular season.
Yeah, they outscored them by 11 points in the second half. That second half surging Baylor to a home victory over Kansas. Again, 5 of the top 6 teams go down on this Saturday.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.